The Papua New Guinea Prime Minister Peter O'Neill has flagged a number of changes to the way it goes about managing foreign aid, including banning foreign advisors and consultants. The government has also indicated it will review the role of Australian federal police officers deployed in the country. Paul Flanagan is a visiting fellow with the ANU Development Policy Centre, and he has worked with the PNG Treasury Department between 2011 and 2013, and he joins us now from Canberra. Good to talk to you this evening, Paul. Peter O'Neill says a lot of aid is wasted on middlemen and foreign advisors, that's making local staff lazy. What do you make of those comments?
Thanks, Beverly. Great to have a chance to talk about PNG because it's such an important country for Australia. There's obviously always issues around how effectively we are spending our aid dollars. They've obviously become much more scarce after the 20% reductions that were implemented in the last budget. So we've got to make sure there is value for money in what and how we spend our funds to PNG, our largest aid recipient. I guess from the time that I had there, I had 2.5 years working as a foreign advisor. I have a sense that I didn't really see a huge amount of wastage in areas such as middlemen and those practices. There was probably more questions about whether we were spending the funds in the right areas, whether we'd chosen the right sectors and the right modalities for aid. And there is clearly scope for continuing to ask those sort of questions as our relationship with PNG develops through time.
So you almost think this is a kind of sensible evolution?
Yeah, I think it's a sensible evolution. Like, one of the things the Prime Minister's talking about is making it clearer that if people are working as foreign advisors in a government department in PNG, that they should be employed by the government department. And reflecting on the 2.5 years I had there in Port Moresby, that probably would have made things better for me rather than being seen as an Australian Treasury employee at the time. I was clearly subject to PNG rules, secrecy provisions, codes of conduct and those sort of things. But in terms of fitting with the team, being seen as someone you could really trust because you're there working for the PNG government, I think some of the things being talked about are very sensible.
So did you feel a little bit under suspicion, or that you weren't treated as part of the team and as someone who was really trying to make a difference?
In some ways the position was designed to not be an inline position. It was seen as an advisory one, focused on institution strengthening, and that automatically made us a bit different. We had different sort of arrangements when it came to sort of security, some of our officers were different. So there were those sort of things that just took time, you know. It takes a good 12 months, I found, to start really breaking through, getting the trust, building those relationships that makes one much more effective as an advisor in trying to improve the well-being of the people of Papua New Guinea.
Peter O'Neill has also said as a developing country, we don't want handouts, we don't want Australian taxpayer money wasted. Do you think this is a sense of them trying to establish their independence? In a way, is this almost a kind of flexing their muscle or a saving a face for the PNG government to show that they are capable of managing their own money?
I think any nation feels this sense of national pride, of not wanting to be dependent on other countries. We certainly felt that with the UK and trying to get away from those sort of the apron strings of the UK. So this is quite, I think, a natural sort of evolution. Aid used to be 75% of the PNG budget. It's now under 10%. It's continuing to decline. In that sort of scenario, I think it's fine for PNG to have the aspiration that when it moves through to become a middle-income country, then hopefully it will not be in need of assistance in aid. Hopefully there'll be still very strong relationships and linkages and partnerships that go on, given our shared history and our common interests. But to have that as an aspiration, I think, is reasonable. I do think that's a few decades away still, though.
Yeah, considering how much money Australia would be paying PNG to host the detention centre at Manus, you'd imagine that they are still quite heavily dependent on that kind of money coming in. And the economy is not in great shape.
A bit worried about the economy. There are things that, even today, there is an announcement made that the deficit, which is what sits under 2% here, they thought it was going to be 4.5% this year. In fact, it's going to turn out to be 9.5%. And the debt to GDP ratio has jumped in the last 6 months, an estimate from about 27% to 41%. These are going to be increases and gaps in between expenditure and revenues that are going to be very hard to finance. other problems with exchange rate issues too, that are levelling and decreasing the level of imports, making business hard. So it's a young country. We took centuries and centuries to evolve our institutions that we now take for granted. I think we've got a few decades there of holding hands and working in partnership as equals with PNG. And some of the initiatives being talked about, I think, are good things to look at, to review, to discuss as this development cooperation program is kept up to date.
Paul Flanagan, thanks for your insights on this issue.
Thanks a lot then, Beverly.